people say that you don't want to meet your heroes because you will be disappointed by their humanity. But I found that the opposite was true with Carrie.
When I was doing my PhD, I said I will never work on women's issues.
Reading Something Wicked, I was like, these books are ahead of their time. That makes me so mad because I'm ready. I'm ready to full send. For women in their mid to late 30s who want to get married, the girl boss mentality is not attractive to men, nor is it really fun to do. I'm tired. But at what point do we have to lean into it?
And it's slowly over time been taking things from women and trying to have women mimic men. That's why the androgyny is there. So first it was a home, then it was our fertility, then it was our husbands, now it's our bodies are actually being taken from us. The androgyny goes away. And actually what is restored are things like romance and relationships and the mystery of courtship. But that's when we really have men adrift, because there's no purpose and they don't know who they're supposed to protect, who they're supposed to be procreating with, or who they're supposed to be providing for. And so all of those things get kind of cracked open in ways that are just become very vicious. The fundamental gift of femininity is active receptivity.
Hey everybody, welcome back to With All Her Mind. I am Justice Keel, and I'm really excited for today's episode because, again, I have Dr. Carrie Gress on for a Q&A. So if you missed last episode, I did an interview with Dr. Carrie Gress about her upcoming book, Something Wicked, Why Feminism Can't Be Fused with Christianity. And today I got to just pick her brain with all sorts of questions that I had, that some of you sent in, that some of my friends sent in. And it was just such an honor to be able to get her wisdom on life as a woman of God. Dr. Carrie is such a mother in the faith, and I am so thankful for her work. I'm so thankful to know her. I'm so thankful that she shared so much time with us, for you guys, for me, and I know you guys are really going to enjoy this episode. Last time I told y'all, people say that you don't want to meet your heroes because you will be disappointed by their humanity, but I found that the opposite was true with Carrie. She is even more warm, even more feminine, even more full of God's grace in person. And that is something extremely rare in the world of successful people. So I just wanted to share that from the personal side. And also, it's hard for me to even put into words how important her impact has been on my life, and her books have been on my life because they've really shaped so much. I mean, I quote her so many times in my book, Feminist to Feminine, that I was joking with her that I probably owe her royalties or something because she was that influential in just shaping my understanding of what it looks like to be a woman of God. She is a pioneer in this research, in this field. And so there weren't really a lot of other resources out there for me to even look at as far as being empowered as a woman of God, but still in God's design for us. Anyways, you guys you're not here to hear me talk today. You're here to hear Dr. Carrie talk. So without further ado, let's get into her episode. And in case you missed her bio last time, I'm just going to read it to you guys really quick. But Dr. Carrie Gress is a scholar at the Institute for Human Ecology at the Catholic University of America. She has a doctorate in philosophy from the Catholic University of America and is the editor at the online women's magazine Theology of Home. Her work has appeared in numerous publications. She has lived and worked professionally in Washington, D.C. and Rome, Italy, and her work has been translated into 9 languages. She is the author of several books, including Ultimate Makeover, The Anti-Marriage Exposed, Theology of Home, and The End of Woman, How Smashing the Patriarchy Has Destroyed Us, and her upcoming book, Something Wicked, Why Feminism Can't Be Fused with Christianity. All right, we are back with Dr. Carrie Gress. And I'm very excited because the last interview we did was super fun, just getting into all the details of your new book that's coming out in January 2026, Something Wicked, Why Feminism and Christianity Can't Be
Feminism Can't Be Fused with Christianity.
There we go.
I know. It took me a long time to get it right.
Tongue twister.
Yeah.
If it makes you feel any better, I can't remember the subtitle of my book. So,
oh, good. That does make me feel better.
In today's episode, we're going to be doing a little bit of background on you, and then mostly just diving into some Q&A questions from the people online.
The people
from women about all things womanhood. So my first question for you is, how did you get into this research around feminism and womanhood and all the things?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I 100% did not intentionally seek it out. In fact, when I was doing my PhD, I said, I will never work on women's issues. Yeah. So I guess it was sort of a foregone conclusion that I would end up working on women's issues, but largely because I thought much of what I was looking at was super academic, very in the weeds, not very applicable, and not something I could give to women in my life to be helpful.
Yeah.
So that's always been kind of a guiding principle of, a lot of my work. Once I finished my dissertation, it was like, well, I got to start writing things that I want people to read instead of just, 15 people to read.
Right.
Just dusty academic stuff.
Because a lot of that high-level academic stuff is just read by other people who have that level of education, which is not very many people.
Yeah, and that was 100% not what I wanted. I really felt strongly about trying to reach people where they were in language that they could understand and whatnot. So anyway, one of the books that I wrote was about the Virgin Mary, and then I was talking about what's happening historically. And I came up with this idea: are we living in the age of the anti-Mary, or more one that's more positive about Mary and can kind of appreciate her womanhood and whatnot? And when I was writing that, I was looking at, it was when Hillary Clinton was running for president, and I was looking at elite women in the culture, and suddenly I was like, wait a minute, these women aren't just like slightly different from Mary as a model of womanhood. Like, these are like this is like diametrically opposed to it in terms
the opposite.
of the life issue and Christianity and just the way that their behavior and all of that. So that was when I came up with the idea of the anti-Mary, where it's obviously like the Antichrist, but it's a very feminine, a womanly way, of kind of the destruction of women. And it's historically really unusual. You don't have that. In fact, there was, most organizations in historical periods recognize kind of the difficulty in corrupting womanhood. And so it's historically really anomalous. So I had a chapter about that in one of my books, and then the publisher said, well, this is a fascinating chapter. Can you write a whole book on this? And I said, sure. And so then I signed the contract and was like, wait a minute, this might not be as easy to write as I thought. And then, I kind of panicked, like, is there enough information? And of course, it's just, I'm still writing on it. Like, I can't get,
Pandora's box.
It's everywhere. Yeah. It's been just overwhelming. And so anyway, after that, I wrote The Anti-Mary Exposed. I had a lot of people say, can you write a book that's more for Protestants or for the secular world? Because everybody needs to read this book. And so,
even though I still think Protestants can learn a ton from Anti-Mary Exposed, I loved that book.
Oh, thank you.
So
yeah, no, thank you. I know it can be a stumbling block, but I think you're right. There was a lot in it that was, I think, is helpful. Yeah. Especially from a Christian perspective.
Yeah.
And then The End of Woman was very secular and much more secular. And then what came out of that was something wicked, because I realized, like, we still have this enduring issue of feminism and Christianity that nobody's really addressed the roots of it. And so, like, let's just like put this out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely just kind of walked into it gradually. I actually would love to sort of switch topics again at some point and do something. I have a couple of other projects in mind that I'd like to get back to. And so anyway, that's
exciting.
Yeah, I'm working on a couple of things. But anyway, I don't know if I'll ever, I probably have more work to do on this, but it's going to be great to get this book out and kind of take a break from it and do something different entirely.
And I told you this yesterday, but reading something wicked. And also I felt this way a bit with The End of Woman. I was like, these books are ahead of their time. And it makes me so mad because I'm ready. I'm ready to full send. But I'm really, really excited because I think that these will be used as like framework for the next generation who are fighting this fight, the ideological fight against feminism.
Yeah, no, it's been really amazing to see it because when I wrote The Anti-Marriage Exposed, nobody knew what I was talking about. Like I actually gave one talk to a group of business leaders, and afterwards the organizer was like, nobody really knew what you were talking about. Like they didn't understand.
Oh my gosh.
Like that and it was even coming from a pro-life perspective too that I was talking about. And you know, the problem is we've got young women walking into abortion clinics. Like this is a crisis of womanhood that we have to navigate and deal with, and it can't be dealt with at the last place before they go to the abortion clinic or before they're at the clinic. It has to be dealt with much further.
Culturally.
Like, okay, we'll help you when you're like walking off the plank. Like we need to help before they are on the pirate ship, kind of like
that's so
back
good.
before that. So anyway, it was just kind of a funny realization. Like, I guess not everybody really thinks there's a problem with women, even though everybody's fighting for the pro-life cause in that group in particular. So anyway, it was just a real eye-opener to me to realize that there's major issues that we have to deal with that nobody's really been talking about. And so gratefully since then, the conversation has shifted dramatically. And I'm seeing a lot of young women who are really excited about my work, and many who are even starting research on it and different areas of using my books and things like that. So it's been exciting. I'm trying to facilitate that and mentor people in different limited ways because there's only so much time in the day. But just really encourage women in terms of what their areas of interest and how to expand on it, because there's so much to be looked at.
Yeah. It's so true. And I'm very, very thankful for all you're doing to help the next generation with this issue. I think that a lot of what you initially had to do is like waking people up from the Matrix kind of thing, because I didn't even realize that there was a problem, which is really funny, until I was in the pageant world. It was actually when I was Miss Tennessee USA, and I felt all this pressure to look autonomous, to look like it's just me. I'm here on my own. And I felt like I needed to keep, I had met Chris, my husband. I felt like I needed to keep him kind of private, keep my family, connections private. And, they've changed the rules since I was involved. But at the time, like, you could not get married as a title holder. And it was an unspoken rule not to get engaged while you were a title holder, at least until after Miss USA. And so I remember like just the indignation of like, this person is giving me so much strength and helping me do a better job as Miss Tennessee. And I have to act like he's not.
He doesn't exist.
Yeah. And I've got to act like, I started thinking like, this is the reason I want to even make a difference in the world, is because I love these people.
Right.
And that was kind of like what started to open my eyes was the fact that they wanted, nobody was overtly saying this, but there was this covert pressure of like, don't talk about how in love you are with this person, that you've found your person for life, and that if you were not competing right now, you'd be getting engaged. Like,
right. Wow.
Yeah, it was super interesting. And so that I'm very thankful for that experience, because the Lord used that to help me realize there is a problem. I was diagnosing the problem incorrectly, because I was like also thinking I was like, but the reason we work is for our kids. Like, I'm like, well, hopefully we can actually be with our kids and,
right.
take some steps back. But, okay. That being said, let's dive into some of these questions.
Sure.
I'm going to kind of bounce around a little bit, but let's start off with a really good one. How can stay-at-home moms reclaim the dignity and importance of their role in today's culture? Just a little small question for you.
No kidding. I think this is a really great question, and one that's really important because it hits all the notes. Stay-at-home moms are really the front line of the issue because we're so denigrated and looked at like
you're just
so
staying at
unessential.
home. Yeah, it's like,
Exactly.
just
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so unimportant and vital. And anyway, so I don't know. I mean, one of the things obviously is to do a good job of it, to live it well and to not apologize for it. I think that's, or not to feel badly or somehow you're less than. I mean, I think that's half of the battle. And, I was an older mom, so it was always really interesting. We had this babysitter for a while who would take my kids out to go get food or drinks, and people would like wag their finger at her, like, "Why do you have so many kids?" She was like, "They're not my kids." Anyway, no one ever said that to me, so I guess I was old enough that I never got that. And
like, you're allowed to have. She has 5 children, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
But maybe because I was just older or something. But there's a certain amount of there's also the beauty of kind of the authority that we have as mothers, and just the presence that you can be and the dignity that I think comes from it, and just even the relationship that you have with your children and that dynamic. One of those pieces is to raise good children. I mean, that's kind of speaks for itself too. So anyway, I think it's going to be systemic and for a long time, but until we start taking it really seriously and giving it the dignity it affords, it's going to be a lot harder for people to do that from the outside. And so it's a matter of really, just owning it, I think is really an important aspect, and being proud of it can go a long way.
And I think about the message that communicates to your children. Maybe you're still battling with not feeling the dignity in it and everything, but I think just being faithful in it, even when you're not feeling it, especially when you're not feeling it. Imagine like your children, then they will have only seen a mom who was happy to be in this role, at least from their perspective. They're gonna, they're gonna experience that. Oh, my mom was dignified in this, and so I think that like our generation can make a sacrifice in this of even when we're not feeling it, to be like, I'm not going to go with my feelings on this. I'm gonna continue to bring value to this. I'm gonna continue to show my children that this matters, so that our next generation sees that, both boys and girls.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said too for just reaping what you sow. Also, like that this is kind of one of the hidden pieces that people don't realize, is that motherhood's a lot easier the more you give to it, that dynamic of being in real relationship with your children. And then, of course, all my children have relationships with one another, which are interesting and dynamic and not always great. But but I think that is another piece of it, is really recognizing that you're cultivating something really something eternal, really. Like, this isn't just a garden or a job. This is an eternal soul that you have the capacity, and even the dynamism of each child, birth orders, different personalities are different, all those things. It's, sometimes it's incredibly frustrating because you're like, I can't do the same thing with each child, but it's also that kind of puzzle in terms of like loving people, like what makes them tick, and anyway, so I think there's all kinds of challenges, but there's also this dynamism to it that's and each child changes each year, it seems like, too, as they're maturing. Right. But you're going to reap what you sow too, and I think that was one of the things I've found from women that I admired that stayed home with their children, was just to see the closeness of their relationships that weren't, not to say that they weren't challenging, but to see the fruit of it, and that what happens to those children, the depth of character and peace and presence and all of those things, I think are really important and come about from it.
And to the woman that asked this question, might I recommend Ultimate Makeover?
Oh, that's right. You
Dr.
have that. Oh, that's so funny. I didn't even notice that.
I loved that. I got that after I'd read. I read it out of order of how you wrote it.
Yeah, because it's one of the earlies. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's so good because it's bite-sized, but it's still so deep. It's not like, I don't want to say a name of something and, be rude, but there's
it's not cooking tips. Yeah.
No, there's other like women's daily devotional thing, and you read it and you're like, cool, that did nothing for me.
Yeah.
I was challenged, and
that's so good.
it gave me something to chew on throughout the day,
Mm-hmm.
and something to take to the Lord and be like, okay, God, I want to be, I want to be laying down, my sacrificing for my children and loving them radically, like you talk about in the book, and letting this transform me. So anyways, that's my shameless plug for.
Oh, that's so great.
Book.
I hadn't even noticed that. So that's really fun. That's great. Yeah. That's one of the books I would love to redo and re-release because I think there's a lot to it. So
you should make a coffee table book version.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay. So here's this is like a spicy question a little bit culturally today. Should women who are not naturally feminine pursue being more feminine?
I think it's a really interesting question because I think it's one of those pieces that feels like it has to be prayed about and sorted through in a healthy way, because you have to ask the question, am I unfeminine because I'm like following the culture? Am I unfeminine because I suffered abuse and I'm like hiding myself? There's all kinds of reasons for it, and much of it, have I never appreciated feminine women. I remember when I was a grown woman and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to say it. I like pink. Like, for my whole life, I was never supposed to like pink. And I was like, I love pale pink. I mean, it was the dumbest thing. But for my whole life, you weren't supposed to, if you were a girl, you weren't supposed to like pink. And so, there's silly things like that have kind of molded us. But I think it also always it comes back to what do you mean by the definition of feminine? Feminine is, I think, we can sometimes make it a little bit too cookie cutter. The fundamental gift of femininity is active receptivity, is the reception of others into ourselves. I mean, what does a woman do best? She carries people in her heart. Over and over again, this is the Virgin Mary in Scripture. It says she pondered these things in her heart. So we carry our children in our bodies. We carry them in our hearts. We think about them all the time. Like we pray for them. All of those elements, I think, are contained in our bodies that happen. So I think there's that element of, if you can start there and recognize that mothering is a verb and a gift of self, then after that, the question of feminine, masculine kind of evaporates because, again, we've talked about the gifts of men being procreate, protect, and provide. Well, if you're grasping at those elements, then maybe you should consider a little bit more being receptive. And I think it's also that interesting balance between women who feel like they have to control everything too. That's a really important piece to sort of analyze. That piece of control and manipulation, or it can manifest itself as manipulation if it's not ordered. So anyway, I think it's big questions like what do you mean by feminine, being feminine? And there's obviously questions of comfort and your character and your temperament and all of those kinds of things. But I think, and then there's even just the whole bigger question of like sports. Some of that just gets. I played collegiate sports, and so I know some of it just gets rubbed out of you from kind of that sports culture and whatnot too. So anyway, I think it's a great question, but there's a lot of different spokes to it that you have to kind of navigate and figure out like what's at issue.
It sounds like what you're saying is it's not what you do, it's how you do.
No, I think that's a good answer.
It reminds me in Something Wicked, you talk about, and maybe this doesn't connect, but in my brain it's connecting. You talk about how you were dating a guy and you broke up and then he married a kindergarten
teacher. Yeah.
And can you talk about that? Because I thought that was a good example of like a practical way of growing in some feminine traits.
No, this was a really amazing gift that I got. So it wasn't just one guy, it was like several people that ended up like marrying kindergarten teachers. And I was like, and it was amazing because I was doing a PhD. I was working on K Street in Washington. Like I was doing all the things that the
Yeah.
feminist world told me I was supposed to be doing. I was ambitious and I was trying to be outspoken, even though it was totally against my whole, like, it was the worst thing for me to try to be outspoken. Anyway, and then I remember just thinking, okay, what do these kindergarten teachers have that I don't have? Like, what's the appeal? And I started listening. Like, this is one of the things I think is so interesting. You start listening to men speak when they don't know that you're listening. And the best way to do that is music lyrics. Like that it says there's so much in music lyrics that we could pick up. And I actually have thought about including more in my books, but you can't because of copyright and whatnot. But anyway, but I overheard one of the men that I work with he said something about a woman being really sweet. And I just thought, I don't even know what that means. Like, what is that? It's that question, and back to like being more feminine. Like, to me, sweet just meant like saccharine, and you were suppressing all of your emotions, and you weren't being genuine and whatnot. And then I realized, like, no, sweet means like thinking about other people and what their needs are and trying to anticipate and one of the things that actually had happened when I was a younger woman is I went shopping with a friend of mine, and there was some shirt that was just a mess at this store, and I went over and I folded it. I thought I was being nice, and this friend was like, "You are so OCD, you can't even leave that shirt like that." And I was like, that wasn't OCD at all. I was just trying to be nice, but I guess I look OCD, so I should never do that again. So it's just stupid stuff like that gets rubbed out of us, that we realize. And so so it was one of those, it was kind of a relief, like, okay, I can actually embrace this again instead of feeling like I'm OCD and controlling and doing something disordered. Like, it's actually okay if I'm engaged and looking at people's needs and seeing what they need and trying to anticipate that. And there was another experience I had. I was on a date with a friend of my boyfriend at his Christmas party, and there was a bunch of lawyers. And I remember talking with one of the other partners, and he had asked me a question. I was teaching high school at that point for a very brief stint, and he was asking me something about how I like teaching, and I just gave some very cynical, like jaded response, and that was the end of the conversation. And I just remember thinking, like, I don't even like that person that just showed up, like, but I felt like I had to be abrasive, So anyway, it's those kinds of things that kind of get pushed on us, that we think we have to be smart and abrasive and clever, and and then you realize nobody wants to be around that woman. Like, it's just hard to be around.
I don't even want to be around myself when I'm like that.
Yes, exactly. That was it. Like, I don't even like that person that just showed up. So anyway, at the end of all of it, after I was like, I spent a year kind of thinking about this, and I changed the way I dressed a little bit, less, suits and things like that. And then it was a hot day in Washington. I was in the metro, and I was wearing a linen skirt and cardigan sweater. And this guy comes up to me and says, "Are you a kindergarten teacher?"
So sweet.
Anyway, it was so great. It was like you couldn't make it up,
Yeah.
And anyway, I said no and just like smiled for the rest of the day. Like, okay, I think I'm making progress
you
here.
did it.
Exactly. So,
I thought that was such a sweet story.
No, it was great. Yeah, it was really special to just like to be able to experience that and kind of like reanalyze all those pieces and realize like I just didn't understand what was important, and I'd absorbed way too much of the culture and what I thought was important, and really scrutinized it. And I truly don't think I ever would have gotten married if I hadn't done that, because I would have been really unapproachable and unengageable. And but I think it's really interesting to see how we present ourselves in a way we have no idea that we're presenting ourselves to.
And I think there can be a lot of shame for women who are not naturally feminine, and that could be even, and I know, again, I even hate to say it that way because it sounds, there's so many connotations to that word that maybe I'm not meaning to include, but I think it's, my heart is that women wouldn't feel ashamed in that, and that we could just a little bit more objectively look at ourselves and be like, no, we actually don't need to be ashamed that, this makes a lot of sense. Like, there's been a absolute war waged at us in our identity. Yeah. And it makes sense that it is going to take effort to get out of that. It makes sense that it's going to take effort to combat that, because it's literally the matrix that we're existing within.
Yeah.
And to get out of that is really, really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And even people who you think are just effortlessly feminine, I think everyone has a bit of a battle with this. And so I just hope that even women listening, if you are struggling with your femininity, that you don't feel ashamed hearing us even talk about this, but that you can just objectively take a look at yourself, because I think we all need to.
Yeah. No, all of us, we're all recovering from feminism. It's just kind of a wash, and there's going to be different areas where we've been affected by it, and scrutinizing them. It's going to be great because it either confirms like this is who I am temperamentally, or it's like maybe this needs some work or needs to be changed, or I never scrutinized this about myself, or maybe this is not helpful to me or helpful to others around me or whatnot. So I think it's always going to be kind of work that's worth doing in terms of coming to know yourself as who you are and God made you to be.
And what's great is, it's not only just helping you and your development of your eternal soul, but generations after you too will be impacted by that.
Truly.
Yeah. Okay. So next hot question. What misconceptions do you think that women today have about submission, service, and nurturing? Or you can tackle, this is kind of three different things. So,
right. Well, I think the bundling them together, I think the big thing is they've been so denigrated that people just hear like doormat when they hear those things, that you have no spine, you're a jelly, like kind of thing. And they also hear lack of control, unintelligent, all of these things that have been framed for us, instead of really understanding the role that they can play that's actually healthy and building. And so it was service, submission. What was the third one?
Nurturing.
Okay. I think these are really interesting areas to just start unpacking and really figuring out, like, okay, let's just think about what nurturing is. Even just thinking about people feeding us. Like, isn't it an amazing thing when you go to somebody else's house and they feed you a meal and you feel like you leave that place a better person, you know yourself a little bit better because you've just been edified by these people and they've seen you and they know you and they can ask you the right questions. Like, this is an amazing gift that we have. And I think the problem is it just becomes tragic in terms of feeling like, why can we just not give people what they need? The people in our life, that which they need and that which we have the capacity to give them. And maybe this is even where, all of these pieces, I think there are three important stages of maturation. The first piece is understanding that we're the daughters of God. We have to start there and just even know that we're loved. And then that, when you're a daughter, you're a child, people are pouring into you. Yeah. There's always this pouring that goes into you. And you obviously have to, grow and mature in that. And then the next stage, of course, is just is a spousal relationship that you come into when you get married, and you become a team. So there's more of you you're being poured into, but you're also pouring back out. Like it goes back and forth. And then to get to that third point, you have to get to this place. Motherhood has to come after it. You can't put it before, because that's when you are selflessly giving of yourself. And it's coming back to you in strange ways, but it's not like you have to actively give, especially when it's a small child or even when you're pregnant. Like it's 100% giving and giftedness. Yeah. And all of those things are built on trust. They have to be built on trust, and that we are worthy of being able to do them, and that God, we have something to pour out of ourselves. So if you don't have the daughter part, you haven't progressed through these stages where you're a daughter and then you become trustworthy and yoked, all of that. Anyway, I think this is some of why we have these obstacles with understanding the importance of these elements, is that we don't want those things. We get stuck in this kind of daughter role, or this, with the little marks is on our shoulder telling us we've been victimized and we're wrong. And we hear those words and we just feel like, this isn't for me. I want my career and whatnot. So anyway, and yet then we will do those things in our career. We'll work the extra mile. So it's a funny combination of really understanding, again, the role of the family and how do we put our compassion where it needs to be, where God wants it, and start there with the immediate and, that which is local and close to us. So anyway, yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of ways that we could talk theologically about even just the idea of submission, and kind of that proper ordering of family life and whatnot. But I think fundamentally, it comes back to understanding what female maturity is and growth, and how ultimately, when you are a mature woman, you have a capacity to pour yourself out the way Christ did to others. You know, God, who's greater, comes down to help the lesser. And this is the beautiful call of motherhood: is the woman is obviously intellectually superior and older than a small child who's 100% dependent upon her. But there's great glory in being able to mimic that dynamism of helping that someone can help themselves. So anyway,
that's so good.
There's a lot there, but
yes. And I think just like you're talking about, like, in order to reflect that image of Christ's love for us to our children, we have to be grounded in the Lord and receiving his love and staying close to him.
Yeah, right.
We don't have, we love because he first loved us. Like, we can't do it without him. And that's probably a lot of the reason that culture is struggling with this, because they're so disconnected from faith. So many people right now.
Right.
How do you personally balance being ambitious and also being content in your vocation at home? Because you've accomplished a lot. I have in the intro, I will be sharing your bio and all the things. So people have heard. And you're a mom of 5.
Right. I think one of the things is always just kind of I prioritize my family and always have. And actually, all of this started because it was just something. I had to finish my degree, and I realized I could write at night and it wouldn't bother anybody. Like, I could still, and then you realize, like, well, wait a minute, I just wrote a book, but I have to talk about it now. You can't, it's not like you can just hide at home writing books. Some people need you to sell the books.
Yeah.
So that was the realization, like, oh my goodness, I have to talk about this. So I didn't really want to. I mean, that was the harder part for me, was leaving my comfort zone and being able to, like, get out there and actually talk about these kinds of things. Because it's, especially something as like What a Lightning Rod, let's talk about feminism, So anyway, I think that for me, it always comes back to the touchstone of, like, okay, what is fundamentally serving my family? And my husband and I have these discussions about, okay, should I be traveling right now, or do I need to just stay home for a while? And prior, I had a baby 5 years ago, and prior to that, I was traveling once a month. And then when I had the baby, I stopped traveling, and now I do it intermittently, but it's not anywhere near where it still was before that. But I think and then you have to look at the different personalities. My daughters are older now. They're going to be going to college soon. I really want the time with them, and I think they need the time with me. I know it's not going to last, and it's really important to me. So I'm traveling more with my kids. I try to bring them with me, and then they get to see a little bit more of the world and all of that. So I think there are ways to do it, and be very conscientious about, okay, asking that question, what's good for my family? And what does my family objectively need right now? And, my kids always groan when they hear I'm going to write another book. Because they know that it's going to be hard. Because it takes me away from a lot of things. Gratefully, I can write them quickly, and I kind of crank them out. But it's really, it always feels like that balance of, what is serving our family, and we have a lot of tuition needs right now too. So that's the bigger question. Like, it's not because I don't want to be with them. It's there's that balance. So
a little practicality thrown in there.
A lot of practicality.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this question kind of piggybacks off the other one, but is it possible to balance family life while trying to pursue higher education as a mother?
Yes, I think this is, it depends on the program, but I'm a big fan of it, especially, it worked for me incredibly well when I had small children. I always had in the back of my mind, like, people hearing this voice of, like, it just gets harder the more kids you have, which is 100% true. But I also kind of knew what I was doing at that point, again, because I had been in school for most of my life. Yeah. And so I kind of just figured out and it takes a lot of discipline. I think that's really the key issue. Like, you have to stop watching TV. You have to stop scrolling. Like, I didn't get on social media until after I finished my PhD because I knew it would, all those things would sort of soak up time that I just didn't have. So, but in terms of the balance, I found just the intellectual life was so well balanced by having children because it didn't exhaust the same kind of mental work during the day.
It's like the opposite parts of your brain you're using for those things.
So it was great because I could actually think, while I'm doing dishes or something. Okay, tonight I have to work on this. Let me think through that problem. And then by the time I got to writing after everybody was in bed, it was really easy to focus on it for an hour or two and then repeat it. So that's how I got my 300,000 word dissertation finished. Was through that. So,
oh my goodness, 300,000 words.
Yeah. 5 languages.
Wild.
Yeah. It was a lot of work.
For context, I feel like your average book is what, 60?
60.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so wild.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So it was good. So that was also like, if I can write this, then I can write other books too, but and a lot of it again was temperamentally. I had already been a journalist. I already knew how to write and really be focused doing it. So that obviously helped me a lot.
Yes.
But I think there's a lot to be said for different, if it's something you feel called to do it in bite size, especially now things are so easy. You don't have to be at every, there's so many online programs that you can do gradually. And that's what I did too, even before I was married. I always worked full time, and then I gradually knocked out all the course requirements and whatnot. And that worked, I think, really well too. And it was actually harder than when I had kids because I was I was using my mind all day, and then I would go to classes, and so
use your mind more.
So again, I think it's a balance and sort of figuring out what works for the family in different stages and what the requirements are. But if you're just doing it because you're bored, it's not always the best answer. Or there's got to be real. And sometimes God obviously calls us to things we don't know why we need them.
Right. Yes.
But it has to be a discernment process. Like, God, is this where you want me, or am I running from something? Am I hiding from, am I just bored? Do I just, how do I navigate these pieces and see them in light of what your will is for my life?
And I'm not in any formal programs or anything right now. I'm a member of like an academic moms group. And I have like very lofty reading goals for myself. And so I'll do the same thing. I basically don't listen to music. I'll play classical music in the background because I do love music, but I can play that while I'm listening to audiobooks.
Right.
I have an AI reader. So
nice.
I just try to use the time during the day while I'm doing other things to be feeding my mind. But you do,
that's really smart.
It's not the same, not the same level as a 300-page dissertation, but cutting out scrolling. I've got like a lock on my phone that keeps my apps locked down,
Oh, that's really smart.
most of the day.
Yeah.
Things like that have really, really helped me to prioritize that, because I realize like just scrolling is literally wasting my time and doing nothing and doesn't fill me up, but learning really fills me up and helps me enjoy motherhood more. So,
And I think Audible has made all the difference. Like, I get through books now that I would never sit and read, but if I can listen to it, especially like when I was nursing and things like that, it's really remarkable how much is available on that. And that, I think those, and that always feels like kind of a rabbit hole. Like, okay, I listened to this book and this book is like it. And so, it's great.
It really is. And I was talking to somebody the other day, and she was asking if there's anything more affordable than Audible. So I also can recommend Libby, which you can get, and Hoopla. Both of those you can get through public library.
Nice.
And you might have to wait, a little bit on the book, but it'll be free. So that's another possibility.
That's a great idea.
What do you believe is the strongest argument for feminism, and what is your response to it?
Well, I would have to say by default. I mean, the strongest argument that has been made is, I think, by John Paul II saying that there's a new feminism. And one of I go through this in my book, where I talk about what it is that he kind of lays out. And he's written encyclicals about women, and he was very focused on dealing with women's issues. He used the word feminism 3 times that we are aware of, once in a private conversation, once in a speech, and a third time in an encyclical. And so I think what he's laying out could have potentially been an okay like rebranding of feminism. The problem is that that's not what got carried forward by Catholic feminists. And so I think that's the real issue is if what he had done, focused on women within the context of family and men and marriage, he focused on the idea of motherhood being an essential, focused on the idea of women are not victims. A lot of these things are like just directly opposed to the feminist jargon and ideology. I think that had real hope for being able to kind of rebrand it. But that, like I said, that's not what happened. And it ended up becoming, Catholic feminism is now sort of this odd blend of Mary Wollstonecraft and John Paul II's feminism that's, I think, utterly confusing to people. But I think, the hard part is the other version that is compelling and appealing. Again, if it were just simply this, is who doesn't want to help women? And that's why it's had such legs. But it's, again, are you actually actively helping women, or are you really thwarting them in their human nature? So anyway, those would be I think the two easiest forms. But they, again, because they've been so thwarted by the ideology that they're just not functional in terms of hanging on to it. Because believe me, it would have been much easier if I could just say, feminism is great. I would I have a very different life. Yeah. Very different battles.
Even more popular.
Yeah. Very different things to focus on and put my energies into than this issue. And I think it's just because it's so misunderstood. It's got to just be pulled apart and really scrutinized.
Is Pope John Paul II the one that coined the phrase the feminine genius? See, which I think is a better, I don't know, from a Protestant perspective. I don't know I don't have all the connotations or the things that come to mind when maybe some other people think of him, but I think of that and I'm like, that's a great, we should have gone with that instead of feminism, instead of Christian feminism. Let's go with the feminine genius, you know?
Yeah. No, I think it would certainly simplify things, but he was very innovative and creative, and that's partially why he used Marx's terms but improved them. He used Hobbes and Locke and improved them. And so this is kind of what he was doing already. He knew the philosophical tradition and thought, okay, how do we just use this in a way that's constructive? And so anyway, like I said, I think there was wiggle room, but it's kind of that window's closed because it's just gone too confusing.
Yeah, it's gone too far. This is a long question that was sent in, but I think it's important to read all that she wrote. So she said, for women in their mid to late 30s who want to get married, the girl boss mentality is not attractive to men, nor is it really fun to do. I'm tired. But at what point do we have to lean into it? Because we have to think about a future potentially alone. We have to think about stability and retirement. This is a conversation at 36 I'm having with my dad for survival purposes. I feel like I have to become like him because there's no one there to take care of me or to partner with. How do we as single women in our mid to late 30s avoid the girl boss trap and feminist mentality while holding this tension of survival and safety?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And that's precisely where I was at in my own life, was just this sense of I may not ever get married. And, I obviously have to provide for myself in a certain respect. But I think this is the problem. It's almost kind of a false dichotomy. Like, it's one thing to work, but do you have to behave like a girl boss? Do you have to take on those characteristics of your father? And this is, I think, really where the confusion lies in terms of our own maturation and development. Like, you will be much more compelling and attractive, and other people will be drawn to you when you can turn out into the world instead of the other way. And that doesn't mean you have to change your job, or you have to behave, or you have to pick one or the other. It's the full integration of your personality and your womanhood into who you are. And, I think about women that I admire in the workplace. And, one woman in particular comes to mind. And I just want to like, can I just sit and talk to you for the longest time? Like, can you please, like, she asks great questions, and she's very approachable, and she's a number of children. There's something about her that you just want to be with her because there's a lot of wisdom there, and like, there's just something very compelling about it. And yet she does amazing research. She's very articulate. She's very compassionate, all of these great things. And so I think this is the problem, is we feel like we have to pick like being more like a man, or we have to pick being more like a woman, when in fact, if you can actually integrate your femininity into the workplace and into the job in a way that's all these great virtues, then you're like on a totally different playing field in terms of people approaching you, and the richness of and thickness of your relationships too. I think everything becomes deeper when you go deeper. When you start really listening to God and allowing him to move your heart in directions that he wants them to go. I mean, this is a thing that I don't think women realize, is that we think about motherhood in terms of pregnancy and biological, but there's certainly spiritual motherhood that we're meant to do with other people, but we're also meant to be actively receptive to what it is that God wants to put in our hearts. And if you have not made space for that seed that he wants to plant, that can get bigger than anything, it will become bigger than you. This is when we allow things to grow in the female soul. You will give birth to it, and it will become bigger than you, and it'll be something that will live on after you. I think that's an important piece of and it requires prayer, and it requires silence, and being open to what God's speaking to you, and not even in words, but just that receiving him. That's really, I think, such an important piece, because then it's no longer a question of girl boss or not girl boss. It's all integrated, and then it all becomes fruitful. And that's what we're ultimately called to, is to be fruitful and to show, how do we bring life to the world? And that's, again, can be either biological or spiritual, or, that's the real key, I think.
That is so good. I think it reminds me, we talked about this in the previous episode about when I went to visit the Sisters of Life. But I even think practically that could be, like, if you're able to the woman who asked this question, go on a retreat and interact with sisters, because especially like sisters who are doing work out in the world like that, it's a great way to see that
modeling and how it's done, and that integration of those parts of the personality that need to be matured or to grow. And I think you're right.
I was very, very inspired by them, and just seeing that their way of being is like a mother, and even though they're not, biological mothers,
right? And that's Mother Teresa's story, I think, is so powerful. She was a nun in Ireland from Albania, and she had this seed planted in her soul where God said, you need to go to Calcutta, you need to go to India and serve the poorest of the poor. People probably thought she was nuts. And she goes to India, and what has she found? She's this whole order that helps the poorest of the poor, the very local, things that look useless. She's helping people die well, and, totally useless. And yet it's this huge organization that she gave birth to and gave life to. And then it got to the point where it didn't need her anymore, and it had a life of its own and survives after. And that's what happens with a child. Is, it's that same beautiful mimicry of the active receptivity of woman to give life to something outside of themselves.
That's so beautiful. I love that story.
Oh.
What are some small but powerful ways to bring beauty and peace into a chaotic family season?
There are obviously, much of it, I think, revolves around the parents' dispositions. And this is something, it's funny, I've been spending a lot of time there. St. Teresa of Avila has this great line about let nothing disturb you. All things are passing. This, it's nothing's going to last long, but just staying steady in all of it. And I've been spending maybe the last year or so just really focused on it, because life can be so chaotic, and you just get exhausted, the emotional roller coaster of things. And so I've really focused on that idea. And then I recently found out that has a name. It's a virtue that has a name, and it's called meekness.
Wow.
And I was like, that is like,
that's not what I.
no, nobody
no.
thinks that's what meekness is. I mean, meekness we think of as like, this is just
being quiet or something.
yeah. And it's not, it's steadiness. It's, you know, it's that
Wow.
idea of like the candle in the wind, like it's still unflappable. It's still burning. No matter how much wind is blowing at it, it's still steady and lit. And so I think that feels like probably the most important thing we can do in our family, because the emotions of the parents are going to be kind of the coda, or the, you know, the backdrop of everybody else in the family. And if there's that constancy and steadiness, then people don't freak out about stuff, you know, like the emotions aren't so inflamed all the time and aren't such a mess. And you know, that's when you have, you know, it's easier to calm someone down just by holding them, or, you know, things like that. I think also the other thing that is so important, totally doesn't get enough attention, humor. Humor is a way, humor is a way to signal safety. And that's really important, to be able to still be signal to your children that they are safe in a situation that feels chaotic. Humor can do that. I would, really think that's an important piece to keep in the backdrop too.
That a lot. That's so good. Can you describe what a healthy patriarchy could look like in an ideal world?
Wow. I kind of like this question. Yeah, no kidding. You know, a healthy patriarch understands this isn't, he's not serving himself. He has authority, which I think comes from this word. I'd have to look it up again to know exactly. Somehow it's connected with this idea of authority that's about cultivating. It's about growing. He's the gardener. He's the one that looks out. I mean, this is also just even like these beautiful scripture passages connected to God the Father, you know, the prodigal son, the father of the prodigal son coming home and seeing, you know, that deep love for the children. And you know, even the fact that he's like, okay, take your inheritance and go, like, but, you know, without knowing the child would come back.
Yeah.
He still lets go. And then the child does come back to him. So in any event, I think that it's that idea of, you know, we've heard patriarchy in such negative for so long that we think of it as kind of self-serving, or even machismo or whatever, like all these weird things. And a good friend of mine has actually been comparing it a lot recently to It's a Wonderful Life. What's it, George Bailey, you know, so I think there are ways to think about it in terms of how do we let men cultivate what they need, good men cultivate what they need to cultivate, and give them kind of the authority to do that without just constantly badgering them or undermining them, or manipulating them, or you know, whatnot. But it obviously requires too that men do their own maturing and deal with their own egos and their own issues. And so I think that's the hard part is, you know, there's a lot of work to do on that to get to that stage. But yeah, I think it's exciting to think about, like, imagine just even young girls being taken care of again in terms of certainly their sexuality, and protected from the things that they're not being protected from. It's Freya India, I think is how you say her name. She's got I quote her in my book talking about how women need parents. You know, girls need parents. We need parents. We're not just made to be just like pals with them. Yeah. No, but we need them to actually step in and protect us and say, this is wrong, or that's, you know, I remember my dad before he passed away, he died shortly after I turned 16. And there was one boy that I spent a lot of time with, and my dad did not like him. And he told me as much, like, no, this is not a good young man for you. And I always appreciated that he said it out loud. You know, at the time, I think I was like totally annoyed because I didn't really like the guy to begin with. But in any event, you know, but it was great to just have him say something and be observant enough to recognize that. So anyway, it feels like there's, and again, it's that balance of allowing a man to, especially in our own culture, and I know my husband and I struggle with this too, just allowing men to be men and to have, allow their vision and understanding to become ordered and to be supported by us. And sometimes that requires women in particular to just be quiet, or to, be meek in that situation, or to be steady emotionally. It can be very hard. So I think that it can be like an incredible fruit from it too, in terms of the order that comes to the family, and the husband's discernment becomes more important. It's not just like on the women to be the faithful ones. It's an exciting thing this is actually one of the points I found from a Jewish rabbi who's since passed away, but he was talking about the role of the father is to connect the children to heaven. He's not just a pal. This is something very fundamental to men, and this is why we have a male priesthood or pastors, or why the Jewish rabbi is a man. Like they're not just there to be like the playmate to their children, but they have a deep connection with the father, and that's their role, is to connect their children with them. So anyway, kind of talked around it a little bit, but partially because I haven't, it's hard to even think about it, because it feels so far off. I know. And it feels challenging, but it's exciting to start thinking about, like, in a really healthy way, what healthy manhood looks like. Yeah. And I love to, there was a situation recently with there was a problem in this prayer group among two men that were in this prayer group, and these men have been meeting for years. And it was really special to see the way in which men handled it. Like some men talked to one man in the group, and the other man talked to another man in the group. Like, it was just, there was something about it that was to see men step up and trying to solve a problem in a community among themselves, instead of like their wives, like dealing with their whatnot. It was just very, and people that knew each other and been praying together for a long time. Anyway, I think it's things like that we just don't see very often. And then when you see them, like men really stepping up instead of just saying like, oh, they can figure it out or whatever, interceding and being involved and engaged in how do we support these people in this situation, I think is really beautiful too. So anyway, it's stuff like using their gifts and being involved in situations that up until recently, they felt like they can't even talk about.
Okay. And you said this in the previous episode, but what are the three specific giftings that men ought to have? I don't know if I'm saying that exactly right, but
procreation, providing, and protecting are the three essentials. And obviously that's going to play itself out differently with different men, but those are the, and when we act in such a way that we take those away from men, that's when we really have men adrift, because there's no purpose, and they don't know who they're supposed to protect, who they're supposed to be procreating with, or who they're supposed to be providing for. And so all of those things get kind of cracked open in ways that are just become very vicious, because they become distractions, or all kinds of things happen. So
and I think people really underestimate the potential power of doing this in individual families. Like, right, because I can get caught up in like, I'm never going to see this in my lifetime, this makes me sad, and kind of feeling sorry for myself, instead of like stewarding what God has given us and our family. We have an opportunity, and we're not great at this, but we're trying to work it out. We're trying to, we're stumbling through it, and seeking to have the Lord's guidance in it of, okay, how do we,
and that's exactly the right attitude to have. Like, we just need to do this ourselves and not worry about until we can do it perfectly, or we know everybody else is doing it. Like, we just got to do what we know that we're supposed to do, and really like dig into that. So,
when we fall off the horse, get back on.
Right.
You got to just keep doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I find myself feeling controlling sometimes, and I'm, and I'm like, I've got to back off.
Right.
I've actually got to back off and let like Chris take the lead, even if it's at a different speed than I would go. That's okay. Like,
and it's an exciting element too, because it's a manifestation of God's love for us through our spouse. That was something my husband and I got engaged at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. And then after that, we went to Chartres Cathedral. My husband's a bit of an architectural junkie. So we went to Chartres, and he's like inspecting the whole church, and I just wanted to spend time in prayer. And so, and it was I had this very clear intuition, like, this is a new stage of your life. I'm loving you through your husband. And that was, on the one hand, challenging because
Yeah.
you have to like reorient yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But at the other, really, really beautiful because you realize, just the body of Christ, it has a very, it's mediated and gifted through the people in our lives, especially
Yeah.
our spouse. So.
Oh, that's really beautiful. Our culture has become so androgynous. And so this gal wrote in, how can we confront the androgyny that has become so prevalent in culture today?
So the androgyny is because of feminism. And this is a whole layout of the end of woman is how do we get from feminism to the trans movement? And it's slowly over time been taking things from women and trying to have women mimic men. That's why the androgyny is there. So first it was a home, then it was our fertility, then it was our husbands, now it's our bodies are actually being taken from us on, in terms of the trans movement.
Yeah.
Totally obliterating our bodies. So the goal is really a kind of androgyny because of the fact that the model is this genderless Marxist worker who's productive. I don't even know what anymore. And used to be steel plants and all kinds of things back in the day when it was otherwise. And now, and the androgyny now too is also meant to be sexual pleasure in any form with anyone like that. That's really the focus is a whole other layer of messing things up. And we can see this obviously with LGBT and LGBT, you know what I mean. Anyway,
all the letters.
You know what I mean. And so I think that's the hard part is we're so steeped in it and we've become such adherents of it that we don't even really know like what's driving the androgyny. But that's if we start reclaiming the woman as mother, as nurturer, as compassionate, as integrating these pieces of her personality, of active receptivity, all of those kinds of things, and suddenly the androgyny goes away. And actually, what is restored are things like romance and relationships and the mystery of courtship and all these things that people lament are being lost, and we can't figure out like where'd they go. We've totally erased all the rules, and so if you put the rules back in, suddenly things, something charming comes out of it again. Meet cutes and all of those kinds of things that we love in a rom-com can actually happen again instead of the dating culture we have now.
Swipe right or left or whatever. I don't even know.
It's a nightmare.
It is. And it's, my friends who are in that world, I just feel a lot of compassion for because I think it'd be very, very difficult.
Really challenging.
Okay. We talked a little bit about this in our other interview, but I think it's really good to get into for those who missed that interview, but just how feminism has impacted men and the manifestation of masculinity. I mean, this is connected to the androgyny thing, really, but
yeah. So there are a lot of ways in which men have been affected. The very first one, of course, is that women were the ones that made the change initially because of our sexual mores changed and promiscuity took hold and the pill and abortion became available such that women's sexuality was supposedly to mimic the masculine and not even good men, but, bad men. So that change has happened and it's not waned at all. It's actually just gotten worse. And so as a result, there's, all those things that were men's purpose, they don't have a focus or a locus to strive for anymore. And Archbishop Fulton Sheen had this great line about how a woman is a measure of the culture because men feel like they have to reach up and strive for her. There's something noble that they want in a woman who...
Jordan Peterson talks about this idea too.
Yeah. So I think that is something that's very real. And in fact, we've gone the opposite direction as women. We've tried to debase ourselves so much and almost back to the androgyny, just be pals with men and be more like them. So anyway, but the other problem is the men feel like they have no voice. They can't really speak about this issue. It's something that they're just sort of stuck with until women sort of work it out. And this is one of the things, and if they do stick their neck out and talk about it, they get shouted down, or, there's some real consequences to it. And, they also have to sit back and watch, there's all kinds of things, even on a work level. Like I can't, we all probably know people that are like, I work with this awful woman and I just keep my head down and I just am waiting till I either get transferred or she gets transferred, or like it's totally oppressive to work in a lot of those environments, and women as well. But men don't feel like they have any kind of recourse, and they know, especially with someone above them, they're really get stuck in a situation if they're the ones calling shots about promotions and things like that. So anyway, I think that's, there's all kinds of ways that they've been struggled from it and not made better men for it. And so then of course they have all these women saying, well, all these awful men, like it's just this, could they be any more caught? Now, of course there are bad men who choose to do bad things, but we're not providing them any way to actually become and be better men. We are not doing that which women have done in the past, which is provide something for them to really strive
be
for.
The muse.
Yeah, right.
Be the source of inspiration.
Yeah.
For goodness.
Right. So it's interesting. It's been really interesting to see how many men do read my work and follow it, because I feel like they, I try not to beat men up and just say, look, this is what has been happening. This is what's been unfolding, and really affirm, like, this is why you feel like you can't say anything. And, but at the same time, let's recognize that we can raise a whole bar, and you can raise your daughters differently, and you can have conversations with your wife. You can pray for your wife or with your wife. There's all these things that we can do subtly and to help kind of cure or heal the whole culture, I think.
Yeah. And I think a woman had to say what you're saying. Unfortunately, in today's climate, a man would not be heard.
Well. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Okay, I know that you had a question for me.
Yeah. So this is I'm really interested to know kind of the Protestant vision of purity culture, because I didn't grow up with it. I don't, it's two words that I think are totally loaded, and I hear all of these different understandings of it. So in any event, if you could kind of describe it for me, kind of some of the baggage and whatnot, I'd love to hear like how what it is and how it functions, and good and the bad and the ugly of it.
I'm probably going to make a lot of people mad with my perspective on this, because I'm not as critical of purity culture as I think most people in my generation and the next generation are. But I'll explain why that is as well. But yeah, so the way that purity has been taught in the Protestant world, and specifically in it is a denomination, even though we're not a denomination, it kind of is. The non-denominational charismatic corner of Christianity. And I would say that probably a lot of mainline Baptist churches fell into this same category, and probably some other denominations, Assemblies of God, and I'm missing some. But there's a group of us that are, grew up similarly. And probably groups that were influenced by like focus on the family. So that sort of corner of Christianity, there was these really, really popular books like I Kissed Dating Goodbye and When God Writes Your Love Story. And so the good and the bad of it, I think most of these books took things way too far. So it would be like, don't date at all. So then as women, we were just like, okay, I'm just waiting here. I'm waiting. And you weren't taught. I did not feel that any of the resources that I was given actually helped empower me to know what a godly man is, or what to look for, or where to find a godly man, or how to attract a godly man, because the emphasis was that you needed to, just protect your sexual purity. And also the way that they would phrase this is protect your sexual purity until you get married, which I think also is not a great way to phrase it, because I think it's continue protecting your sexual purity in marriage as well. Like this is a lifelong thing, right? Like, because that's the context in which a sexual relationship is meant to exist. So it is still pure when it's in marriage. So I think that's kind of one problem. The emphasis was purely just on like, don't give people any part of your body, don't kiss them, maybe don't even look at them sometimes. I mean, it was pretty extreme. And then if you do that when you get married, you're going to have this amazing fantasy, like fairy tale sex life with your spouse. And it's just going to be so easy, and God's going to reward you, make everything perfect because you did what he said. So a lot of people got married and one of two things happened. One is that didn't happen.
Right.
Things were
surprising.
It took time. Yeah. Surprise.
Right.
It took time and effort and, the normal adjustment, things that newlywed couples are going through. Or they struggled to actually connect with their spouse in that way because they had so much shame about their sexuality that there was like that difficulty there. So that's more the direction that like I tended to, is like, it was really hard for me to switch my mind from like, this was bad and now this is okay. And, as I was working through this and I was writing my book, I was thinking about the alternative. And I was like, okay, well, the alternative is the people who wrote these books, a lot of them were a product of the sexual revolution. And so they had either personally experienced or had close loved ones that experienced abortion and, sexual assault and STDs and,
all the things,
all the heartbreak that comes along with all of those things. And so they wanted the next generation to not experience that. So they set the fence like probably way further back than they needed to. But I was like, for me, I would rather be working through these issues than having dealt
STDs.
with STDs and teen pregnancy and all of that. Let alone the fact that we know, like, even emotionally, sexual, like having multiple sexual partners is psychologically like so particularly difficult for women. I mean, it's not good for anybody, right? But there's a particular difficulty for young women in dealing with that. So, I think I actually really loved when I found theology of the body because I felt like it was a more holistic way to talk about sexuality where there wasn't shame. And so it was more proactive of like, this is the purpose of your body. And this is the purpose of sexual relationships is everything is pointing to the Lord. And so then the natural, conclusion is, so it's not for these other things. It's not just for self-pleasure. It's not just for, casual encounters. It's something that is meant to be sacred in the confines of marriage. And I think that would have been a better way to talk about it.
Yeah.
And, just for an example, I remember reading this book in college. I'm pretty sure my cousin was reading it and she was in high school. And we were like reading it at the same time because her mom gave it to us. And the book was about this like 16-year-old girl and this 26-year-old guy. It's a true story. It's their true love story. And like basically God spoke to him apparently that this was his wife when she was like 13. And so there's like a lot of weirdness there. And it's all like, that was kind of how things were framed for us, is like, God's going to speak to you.
Oh, wow.
Like, so you don't need to date because you're just going to know, you're going to just hear the Lord speak to you. And so you don't really need to know how to date or how to like discern, is this a good person? Like, what are his character traits? Again, I represent like a very specific niche in this. And so I know different people have had different experiences with it, but that was like the literature that I was reading. And I remember reading it and being like, yes, I'm going to wait until it's like God speaks to one of us and tells us that's who we're going to marry. And, so that was, thankfully that was when I was like 18. And so by the time I met Chris and I was 25, I had kind of worked through and realized that wasn't
quite
probably going to be very practically helpful for me getting married. So yeah, that's kind of all over the place, but that sort of was my experience. Yeah.
Well, I think it's incredibly helpful to get that perspective because I hear different voices and there's a lot of negativity around it. And so I just wasn't sure, like, where's it coming from? Because I definitely come from, theology of the body and really understanding the role that fertility plays and the goal of it and just the sacredness of it. But also, why there's shame, but also why there shouldn't be shame. So anyway, that's really helpful to just kind of get some perspective on like what's out there, because it's hard to imagine some of the extremes too. So anyway,
yes.
No, it's
And
good.
I mean, I loved learning theology of the body. It's something that I'll teach to my children.
Yeah.
Because I just think it's such a healthy way to frame all of it.
Yeah.
So for people who struggled in purity culture, I recommend you pick up a book about theology of the body, because it's really
No, it seems like a
great way.
antidote. John Paul II again. So yeah.
I know. He did a lot of good things. He did a lot of good things.
He did.
Okay, well, thank you so much again for giving us so much of your time and
my
your
pleasure.
wisdom.
This has been really fun.
And it's just an honor to have you. I feel like you're a mother in the faith, and your perspectives are so needed. So
thank you.
Thank you. And thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you again in 2 weeks from today.